So, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kyle King. I'm the Managing Director of Capacity Building International, and welcome to our version 2 of our webinar on Bangladesh. So this is part of our 2022, yeah, that's correct, webinar series on international models of emergency management in partnership with Capacity Building International and also TEAMS, the International Emergency Management Society. And I'll just go through a quick introduction, and then I'll hand it over to Harold, the president of TEAMS, and then over to our guest speaker today, Anisur, to present the issues from Bangladesh. So again, my name is Kyle King, and we have Harold, and then Anisur from national consultant from UNDP in Bangladesh to present the information today, and is going to answer any questions that you might have. And so just a real quick recap from what we did in 2021 and what we did at the last webinar series, 23 webinars, over 1,800 attendees, and we reached 74 countries, and we presented 12 national models and 7 different partner organizations from NATO and many others. And so what we're doing this time in 2022 is, of course, doing very much the same thing. We're going to continue exploring national models and other topics and themes of interest. But a few quick points, of course, where are you joining us from? So I see that we already have somebody from Bangladesh and also from New York City. Thanks for joining us this morning for New York. And then from Italy as well, good afternoon, going into the evening. So if you do have any questions about the webinar today, then please use the Q&A feature because that allows us to keep track of the questions to make sure that we can answer them. And of course, if we need to get any answers to you later on, we can write those out and send those as well. So using the Q&A feature helps us quite a bit so that we don't lose them inside of the chat. Now, the 2022 program, so we are having the monthly webinar series. We've also are now putting out a biweekly podcast called the Crisis Conflict Emergency Management Podcast, supported also by TEAMS. We also have the TEAMS annual conference coming up, which Harold will talk about here shortly. And we also have a new TEAMS community that we are developing as well, which is in development, and that's for really anybody from the international community that wants to discuss all these topics such as disaster risk reduction, sustainable development, emergency management, crisis management, all these various different themes. Of course, if you're interested in any of those, certainly let us know and we'll point you in the right direction. As far as a newsletter, we do have, this is posted on LinkedIn, so we just make it really open and accessible for everybody. We're up to about 6,400 or so subscribers now. So we publish this every month, and we just send out our webinars, we send out the podcast, we send out things like that. You can find that on LinkedIn. Just look for crisis, conflict, and emergency management, and then we will automatically add you to that list, and you'll get the announcement every month in terms of the upcoming events with TEAMS and everything else. And of course, the podcast is available anywhere that you want to get a podcast, from Apple to Spotify to Google Podcasts. It's all readily available as well. And now upcoming events. And so now we have the webinar today with Bangladesh, and then in June, also in a couple of weeks, we're going to be doing a second webinar for June on the Ready to Respond model with the World Bank. So if you're ever interested in sort of what the assessment tool is when you go look at a national response mechanism, you'll want to attend this webinar because we get into really the model that's used to evaluate national capabilities in terms of emergency response. And so that's going to be quite interesting because it's a tool that the World Bank uses to be able to evaluate the fire service. And so training, education, all these sort of different types of programs, legislation that goes into that. And they have an entire matrix that's developed that they're going to present and to be able to show us what that exactly looks like. And so that should be a very interesting discussion as well. And a quick reminder, so there's a Critical Infrastructure Protection and Resilience Europe conference that's coming up on 14 to 16 June. It's going to be in Bucharest, Romania. If you do happen to be available, you can certainly attend, and there's the website there that you can see on the screen. You can use a TEAMS code for TIEMS, a code when you are going through the registration process and checking out. You'll get a 25% discount. The conference is supported by TEAMS. So if you want to get that discount, just use that coupon code for TEAMS and when you're doing the checkout, and certainly go ahead and attend that event itself. As far as the schedule, so you can see the type of topics they'll be talking about redefining critical infrastructure, mitigating major threats, all the way down to critical infrastructure interdependencies from risk to resilience, and sort of all the different aspects that go in between, including cyber and public-private partnership. So again, use that code TEAMS for a 25% delegate discount. And now I'll turn over to Harold for any announcements from TEAMS. Harold, over to you.
Hello, everybody, wherever you are. And what I like to remind you on is that we have our annual conference Yeah, this is the team's website, and you click. It will be a hybrid event, meaning that you can either attend physically or you can attend and also present virtually. So even if you can't travel to Atlanta, it will take place at the Kennesaw State University in Atlanta in Georgia in US. And the dates are 17th of October to 21st of October. The first day and the last day will also be dedicated to do a workshop on our international certification, and the 3 middle days will be do for the presentation. And the topic this year is challenges in emergency management towards 2030 and beyond. And if you go to Team's website, which I show you here, you can find the main topic, but also the other topics. You find things about, we both will accept academic research papers, which will be peer-reviewed, but also practitioners' talks. So if you like to say something about what you're doing, please submit an abstract. You have the easy chair, and you have the template for what submissions, and the deadlines, which are July 15th for an academic or research paper, and July 30th for a practitioner's talk. I hope many of you will use the opportunity, and even if you can't travel, again, I will say you can also present virtually. So that's, and I hope many of you take this opportunity. At the bottom of the page, you also have the presentation of these 2 workshops. And at the bottom here, you find the concept of the program with welcome and keynote speakers and all submitted papers. And we also will have a panel debate and workshops during the conference. And social events, because meeting each other and talk again and know local culture in Georgia will also be part of the conference. Those who do that virtually, of course, they can participate in that, but I hope many of you find this opportunity interesting and will submit the paper. Before I leave, I like to see the next here is Teams webinars, where I have, and Kyle has also pointed to the LinkedIn page. But here you can find all the presentations and all the videos which are taken. And I think this is a unique database now. So for those of you who work at a university, maybe you have students would like to look into, and you can make up a thesis, because we are now presented, I think, close to 30 countries with their models in emergency management. And there is some good stuff here for research or doing a thesis or something. So that's my encouragement to our listeners today. And I look forward for listening to Anisur about what is happening in Bangladesh. Thank you.
At this point in time, we'll just hand it over to our speaker for today. So Anisur, thanks for joining us today, and we very much look forward to your presentation. And I'll just turn it over to you. So I'll just let you share your screen now.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever is attending this webinar from. My name is Anisur Rahman. I'm from Bangladesh. I'm a Bangladeshi. By profession, I'm an urban planner with experience of working as urban planner and disaster risk reduction. I'm working over 22 years. Worked with the government of Bangladesh. I was a government employee before, and I was in the region in the East Asia for about 15 years, and worked in several countries on disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, urban planning, integration of DRR into development, and so on. So this evening, from my country, so I'm going to present you disaster management system in Bangladesh and how the community preparedness has worked over the years here in Bangladesh, how the system has worked in emergency response basically. So this will be about 15 minutes presentation, followed by the questions and queries you might have. I'll try to give you answer. The first slide is to orient you. If you have not traveled to this part, Bangladesh is in Asia, located specifically in South Asia. It is with a population of 163 million. We are located over a land of 150 square kilometer, and we have long boundary on the west, north, and east with India. It's about 4,100 kilometer long boundary, and we also have about 160 kilometer with Burma on the east. Burma means Myanmar. And on the south, we have a Bay of Bengal. So this is how we are located. And globally, Bangladesh, you might be knowing who are working in the field of disaster. Bangladesh is one of the countries prone to many natural hazard and disaster. So that's why I first like to take you through how geographically we are located, why we are so vulnerable to different hazard, and how it is. So here is a country map where you can see the geographic settings. We are located in one of the largest delta in the world, with the elevation of the land is not that high. You can see here the red bars are between 0 to 8 meter above the sea level most of the cases. So it means that most of the areas are prone to inundation. We have flood all around the country. We have big rivers coming from India side and inundating almost the whole country in the worst case scenario cases. This is one of the flood maps back in 2007, when a big part of the country was inundated. We have drought across the country. Sometimes it is quite severe. You can see on the east, on the western part of the country is quite drought prone. Specifically, this zone, it was very dry sometimes, and it brings a very big concern for livelihood and crop. We also have a hilly part in the eastern side with landslide quite often nowadays due to rapid urbanization. People are settling down on the hills here and there, and quite a few number of times there were big hazard in this area. And we also have cyclone on the across the coast with a lot of big cyclones happened in this part with large casualties recorded here. And not only this, but also we have serious concern about climate change impact. And if we look specifically, the studies are showing quite alarming result. For example, the study shows if there is 1.5 meter sea level rise, then about 15% of the population will be affected. 16% land might be inundated. So it's quite a huge number for the country. So there's a big concern in the future if climate change impacts are really happening. Of course, there are some evidences already across the coast here. So this is the background of the country, which is prone to disaster, and in some cases we manage it well. Let's say in the past, you can see what happened in the country. These are the big natural hazard when the casualty number was quite high. For example, in 1970, there was a big cyclone in the country where 600,000 people died one night. This is official figure. Unofficially, it might be a million, close to a million. 88, there was severe flood. About 85% of total area of the country was underwater. for about 2 months. The international airport was under water, and it was non-functioning for about 40 days. You can imagine how big it was. We had severe flood, severe cyclone also in 1988. In 1991, there was another big cyclone where about 140,000 people died one night. This is official figure again. There are many more missing, and you can see almost repeatedly there was either cyclone or flood, and it's quite a big concern for the country. And of course, we have big concern about climate change impact, which may affect my country very much. And we are already seeing irregular rainfall. We are seeing cyclone. It is happening sometimes 4 or 5 times a year, which has changed the trend quite drastically. Also, the cyclone paths have changed. Earlier, it was hitting eastern side of the country most of the time, but nowadays it has the phenomenon of changing the cyclone path is towards the southwestern side, which is a big concern because many of the people, these are the almost densely populated area. So altogether, we have a big concern for climate change impact in the future. I've seen we have past records of a number of natural hazards. So how this has been taken care of through the management, disaster management. So I will take you through that part now. The country was independent. We got independence in 1971. Before it was same country, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh under British. It was called British India. Then gradually it was divided into 2, Pakistan and India. Then further it was Bangladesh was independent back in 1971. So I'm starting from that part. So initially, during 1970 and 85, and disaster management point of view, we call it here more of reactive nature of disaster management system was here. Because most of the cases, the concept was that when there will be disaster, we need to respond with relief, and some cases rehabilitation. That was the main concept of dealing with disaster. In the past, you can see the evidence also. The ministry was itself called Ministry of Relief and Rehabilitation. That came from very same nature, and it continued in 1982. Also, it was called. It added another point because from different event, they realized that food needs to be added. So the ministry name was changed. The Ministry of Food, Relief and Rehabilitation. This went until there was a big flood in 1988, and then the decision maker and the government started thinking that there is something missing, and then from reactive nature they started thinking of the system approach, the system thought. They started to think we should put a system so that it can be understood well ahead of any natural hazard. So that time flood action plan was prepared in 1988. Soon after big flood, disaster management bureau was established almost the same time. Standing orders on disaster was first drafted at that time, that period 1994. You can see now that the ministry has changed the name. Now, a Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief. It was in 1994. And that part from 1986 to 2000, we consider a system thought period. And again, it changed when we had, there was a cyclone and flood in subsequent years. And that started changing the disaster management system once again. So this time the thought came in around 2000 that we need to think about a comprehensive disaster management system so that we can deal with everything, not going only for relief and rehabilitation, but a preparedness along with all other components to be added. During this period, institutional arrangement was changed quite and restructuring happened quite a number of times. Disaster Management Act was formulated. Standing order on disaster was updated. Early warning system has been updated during this period. Risk assessment culture has started. Now the risk assessment for all the natural hazards. Capacity building of communities on DRR and climate change aspect has taken place during this period. So broadly, what we are seeing here, the disaster management system has changed during last 50 years in this country to deal with natural hazards and events, and learning from the mistakes, learning from the events, how to deal with. These are some of the policies that are guiding, from the national level up to community level here. We have Disaster Management Act, Standing Order on Disaster. We have 5-year national plan for disaster management that comes every 5 years. We have national contingency plan that's for national level. We have city level contingency plan. We have ward level contingency plan. So all of these are indication of comprehensive disaster management in the country over the period, and this is how now overall system is working. We have committees from national level up to community levels, and with relevant agencies. We have National Disaster Management Council headed by the Honorable Prime Minister at the highest level to take decision before any particular year. They sit together to review what is the disaster management plan for the year, and of course during any big event, aftermath of any big event, this committee sits together. And we have Interministerial Disaster Management Coordination Committee, National Disaster Response Coordination Group, National Platform Disaster Risk Reduction. So at different levels, different committees are here. And in a standing order of disaster, each of the committee's roles and responsibilities are quite detailed written, so that they can take actions anytime without waiting for executive order. So the standing order on disaster has given a freedom to the decision maker at any level that they can respond to any emergency aftermath of disaster. So it is well defined that they do not need to wait for their superior to take a decision. So this is a good system that has helped to rescue and respond many communities aftermath of a natural hazard. These are the committees at national level. At local level, we have the lowest tower in village, lowest unit called union. You can see here. So up to that level, we have committees. And these committees take care most of the preparedness activities, and we also have committees that take care of response aftermath of disaster. So overall, this system works. Most of the cases which showed good result during last 5 or 6 years, especially when there was cyclone, when the system worked and people were evacuated on time, and there was less number of casualties. So I will take you how with the example that how the system works. So I'm taking the example of cyclone early warning. When there is a cyclone in the Bay of Bengal, immediately the meteorological department in Bangladesh, they have a cell called Spatial Warning Center, and they start putting alerts right from the beginning. at different level, and they send messages to different medias, of course, to military, to disaster management, other ministry and departments, and also to a special community or committee. They call it Cyclone Preparedness Program. This program has about 80,000, volunteers. They are working across the coast. So they start working when there is a warning from the meteorological department. They start working starting from disseminating the warning or warning messages to the communities and ask to prepare, and special cases they evacuate. This is how the whole things works. It comes to the cyclone preparedness program headquarters, followed by this is disseminated to different zones across the coast, followed by second tier of sub-district, and this goes up to the lowest administrative tower and up to village level. So there is a very well organized units of this preparedness system with the volunteers, and they start working right from the beginning of the alert by the meteorological department and the government. And this is the alert system, locally called signal. So when there are signals like when there is a cyclone formed in the Bay of Bengal, and it is moving slowly forward and gaining strength. So that time one flag is hoisted across the coast. Then and the volunteers there use the megaphone to alert people that people get attention. And this time they also ask the fishermen not to go to the sea for catching. And when the cyclone is approaching to the coast, we have the signal number 4, 5, 6, and 7. That time, 2 flags are hoisted. So this time they start evacuating some of the people. They give priorities to the most vulnerable group, like women or elderly people or child, and they evacuate. There was a cyclone, obviously, during the cyclone time. So this is a photo from that very cyclone time. And when when it is quite confirmed that the cyclone is passing through the coast, at that time signal number 8, 9, and 10 is hoisted with three flags, and that time everybody is asked to be at the cyclone shelter and not to move from there until it is clear. And of course they stay in the cyclone shelter until it is over, sky is clear, and some cases they stay here for a number of days or even week if their houses are inundated. So this is a good system that's working. So now I will show you what is the result. So I talked about the disaster management system that is evolving from experiences and learning from different events. And I have talked about the system that is with the reference to cyclone preparedness in the coast over the year. And now I will show you what is the result, whether it is working, whether systems are working. So what we have seen is, let's take the example of a cyclone shelter that are constructed, because I have told you back in 1970 there was a big cyclone with a casualty of 600,000 one day. So our start is there. And that time, after that, there was initiative of preparation of cyclone shelter. There was 20 cyclone shelter before 1970. Between 1971 to 1980, there was 31 cyclone shelter added. And between 1981 to 1990, there were 72 cyclone shelter added. So you see, not a big progress, because in disaster management or in disaster, those who are practitioners, they know very well. It hits again. Disaster hits again when it is forgotten. So during this period, the event of 1970 was forgotten until there was a big cyclone again in 1991, and they started preparing more shelters, and during this time they have prepared more shelters. Now altogether about 5,000 or more cyclone shelters are there. You may ask, is this the result? I will say not, because you see what happened back in 1970. There was a cyclone which was about 210 kilometers per hour with windy speed, and about 600,000 people died. And at that time, there was no early warning. There was no evacuation system. And that's why this big number of casualties happened. 210 kilometer windy speed. There was no clue what's happening. And there was no clue, especially the people in the coast. And even the government was not knowing what was going to happen. And when it happened, it was about few weeks before people really could know that what happened to the coast, because there are many sub-districts which was totally, nobody was alive in many sub-districts in the coast. So it was that very severe. It's because there was no warning system, no evacuation system. In 1991, again, there was 138,000 people died. This time it was 90 kilometer per hour windy speed cyclone. This time little bit improved, but still it was not enough. There was warning. A warning system was here already in 1991, but it was not properly disseminated. There was very less evacuation. Almost you can say that there was no evacuation from the from the communities which was where the cyclone was about to hit. So that resulted this very big number of casualties. Not only this, this hit our second largest city, Chittagong, on the coast, and at that time there was about 100 aircraft that was staying on the airport that was inundated. That later on it was a dysfunction. 100 aircrafts with about 20 big naval ships were brought on the shore, and that was not functioning later on. Because of this, Chief of Naval Staff and Chief of Air Force was sacked within a week time because they were not prepared. So government took that very decision. So it was improper dissemination. That was not proper dissemination. In 2007, there was a big cyclone again. So now we can see that whether this system has worked over the time, because we learned from the mistakes. And this time there was a cyclone which was 220 kilometers per hour. Of course, much higher than that two-very cyclone. But this time only 306,000 people died. Still, it's quite high number, but compared to these two big cyclones, it was less. So why this one? Because there was proper warning system this time, proper dissemination. People were evacuated from their places to these cyclone shelters and other safe places. So this is how it has worked. So all these three combinations has worked together. Of course, government agencies, non-government agencies, international agencies working in Bangladesh has vast role into this. But overall, this system has worked, which has helped to save people's lives, and of course, property loss information is the system has not yet that very good to identify what is the real property loss or damage, but obviously that is becoming better and better over the time. So this is in brief how Bangladesh is doing in emergency management. yes, we can take if any questions or queries. Thank you.
So yes, thank you very much for that. Can you go back a couple of slides to your national level sort of structure? It's quite interesting. I wanted to ask a question. Go forward
Yeah.
2 more, I think it is. So, and part of the work that we do at CBI, we go and talk to a lot of nations in terms of their sort of construct and their national level system and the response plans and frameworks and everything. And it's interesting to see that you have your national platform for disaster risk reduction integrated into your disaster management system. And many nations do, and many nations do not. So are there any challenges with let's say, the response mechanism that you would see in most nations versus disaster risk reduction? Because it seems you have done very well in terms of integrating the DRR platforms into your national response framework. So I'd just be curious to see if that was a challenge, sort of standing that up and integrating those capabilities. And then, is it widely adopted now and sort of taken that it needs to be there?
Yeah, you are right. You are right. Initially, there was challenges. Still, there are a lot of challenges, but this has started improving back into early 2000. Initially, it was by different stakeholders, particularly the government. They used to think that preparedness might not be very required thing to do. So that's why they were mostly depending on this in this response mechanism, mostly even in 2000. Then I will say it was intervention by international agencies, particularly World Bank, UNDP, and others. So they pushed the thinking that we need to do something which which are integrated into your system, which works well, which you do not need to wait for very much for the response mechanism. You do not need to spend much money into that part. If you are spending here much, because they were giving the example, if you're spending $9 in preparedness, your response will come down to $1. So it's like that. So and government has taken it gradually, and now they have integrated into different main arena. For example, land use plan. Earlier, it was traditional land use plan without considering natural hazard or disaster. But now, if there is a city level plan or even the plan for lowest tower of the country, so risk assessment is must. So they are considering right at the beginning. So how they're protecting the most hazard prone areas are not allowed for any habitation, or not allowed for any heavy investment or even residential permissions are not given in those parts. So now gradually they have improved. Of course, they were challenging in the initial days. Still, there are some cases, but it is started working. It has started working.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that's universal everywhere, right? And I think it gets down to the economics. Eventually gets people's attention. Just the investment and then having that return on your investment is the key argument for many nations. So we have a couple of questions from the audience, and I'll go ahead and just sort of read the first one. So we have one of our attendees is coordinating with Professor Ansari of BUET. I don't know really what that is, but maybe you do. On earthquake risk reduction for Bangladesh. As Professor Ansari has informed me last year, he and his team had already produced risk maps for Bangladesh on earthquakes. So far, the risk maps have not been used for preparedness and response, and I wonder how this could be planned more effectively. Any thoughts on that?
So yeah, maybe he is referring to the there are several levels of earthquake risk map in the country. One of them is at national level, which was prepared back in 2015. And earlier to that, back in 2008 and 9, city level earthquake risk assessment maps were prepared major cities like Dhaka, Chittagong, Sylhet, which are most vulnerable to earthquake. I will say that it is not entirely true that it is not used, but there are some classic examples that how it is started utilizing those risk assessment results. For example, that very risk assessment back in 2009 was indicating that there will be about 72,000 buildings collapse in Dhaka if there is an earthquake of at 6.5 Richter scale from a fault which is located about 190 kilometers from the capital. And there will be a $1 billion loss, economic loss. This is a scenario earthquake assessment. And based on that result, there is a $190 million investment project by the World Bank to take care of, emergency management system of municipal corporation, so that they buy big equipments aftermath of a disaster for recovery, for evacuation and other things. This is one example that very project is still working. Second example is that very earthquake results are showing that most of the fast responding agencies like hospital or fire service buildings are itself vulnerable, because most of these buildings are 100 years old in some cases. So that was a big identification of that earthquake risk assessment back in 2009. So JICA and government initially took into account that very result, and they have, retrofitted most of the vulnerable fire service station in Dhaka, and they have taken initiative to construct new fire station with the consideration of base isolation, that if there is an earthquake, it will be showing against wave so that it doesn't fall. And also they have taken initiative to retrofit many of the hospitals. So yes, Professor is correct that it might have not worked overall, but many of the aspects are taken. I'd like to add here one point. Bangladesh, of course, is in the vicinity of earthquake zone, but I mentioned earlier, when there is no evidence in the generation memory or in the country memory, then it will be forgotten, because there was last biggest earthquake happened in the region in 1897, which was about 8.7 Richter scale, one of the largest in the world. And after that, there was no major earthquake. So people have forgotten about it. People do not believe there might be earthquake. So that's the reason, it is less implemented so far. But if there are shakings, people are still talking about that. Thanks for the questions. I hope I have tried to answer that.
No, it's very interesting. And I think that's, that sort of culture of preparedness, especially with specific things that are not frequent. And yes, are always a problem everywhere in terms of, everybody has a short-term memory, right? So all of our societies. And so the next question that we have is, with respect to rising sea level, how would you assess Bangladesh's response or adaptation in the short, middle, and longer term? So a predictable peak astronomical tide in this century will occur in 2036. PAT in the last century was in 1974. So how would you assess Bangladesh's response and adaptation in the short, middle, and longer term with regards to rising sea level?
Yes. Yeah, very interesting question. Yeah, so far, government has taken short and medium term preparedness with regard to responding to the sea level increase problems in the future. So what they have done initially, they have for the short term, there are a lot of capacity building programs which are associated with food for work in some cases. So these things, helps the people to to learn what they need to do, in terms of, making their house resilient. For example, they have identified in many sub-district level areas that what should be the, plinth level of the house they can raise, because it is not always possible for the government to take care of the individual house repair or maintenance. That's why these very things they are teaching to the communities, and from that many of the communities are learning, and when they are repairing their houses, they are elevating their current plinth to adopt from the inundation or avoid from the inundation, which is very much evident right now in many of the cases. I would say that government is thinking about alternative livelihood for the people who could not go back to their houses even after 10 years of cyclones in southwestern part of the country, which is considered to be a effect of climate change impact. For them, government is thinking to rehabilitate them in the northern side of the country through rehabilitation package, but it has not worked so far well. And we also have a program across the coast to so that plantation across the coast, and that really try to protect the sea life level things. But long-term measures, like if really there is 16% of the areas are really inundated, and if 15% of the total population needs to be evacuated, that very program is not yet in mind from the government perspective. At least it is not in public to deal with that. But given into that, but government has developed one policy document. We are calling it Delta 21,000, targeting 100 years what to do, and this very national level document is to protect the water areas. They have delineated a whole country into 6 different zones, and that very zone is recommended what to do in the future. But that very national level policy is not yet under implementation level. So hope that will be implemented. If that is implemented, so that will be treated as long-term policies that we can say.
The next question would be, could you briefly explain about the cyclone preparedness program?
From this slide, I will try to explain what it is. Cyclone preparedness program is a separate entity which started soon after the 1970 severe cyclone in the country. It was formed back in 1972 by the Red Crescent Society in the country, and since then it is working. Right now it is under the Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief, and it still works as an independent program, and they have volunteers. They have volunteers at different level, starting from Bangladesh. We have our lowest tower is village, and before that we call it union, and before that we have upazila. You can say it's sub-district, and before that we have districts. So this preparedness program work to prepare, work to evacuate people, work to disseminate the warning among the communities. That is their main purpose of working. And the volunteers are recruited based on their willingness. Remember, these are non-paid volunteers. They are not paid for the work. They come of their own willingness. Right now there are about 80,000. Half of them are male, half of them are female, and they are given training and they are grouped based on their communities where they live, and they are located at the lowest tower of at the lowest administrative tower, and they know where is their community and how many people are located there. And when there is a signal from the national level, it comes from the headquarter goes to the cyclone preparedness program offices in the district level, and they send signal to the respective units, and this is how it goes down to the individual volunteers, and this comes through. Nowadays everybody is using mobile phone. Apart from this, they have their own system, radio system where they are connected, and these volunteers, especially when during cyclone time, they are attending different drills, and they are refreshing their memories and activities, what to do. And when there is a cyclone, they work as I showed, based on the signals. They inform the people, evacuate the people, ask the people, manage the people to be in the cyclone shelter, and this is how it works. Yeah, it is quite interesting to many people that what is the payment coming to these volunteers? It is totally voluntary work, no payment, no paid volunteer. Only the equipments are given by the system. Yes, I'm not sure whether I could answer this. If who has asked the question is interested, maybe I can send detailed papers later on this.
Yeah, that would be great. And so actually that brings us to the last point here is, if somebody wanted to follow up with you in terms of understanding more about sort of even the cyclone preparedness program or anything else, how can they get in touch with you?
Yes. You can share my email address. I'm happy to share what I know.
Okay. Yes. Maybe if you just want to go and put that in the chat, and then I'll just have another quick question, and then we can wrap up here. So, sorry, go ahead. Which slide you mean?
Go back to the earlier one.
No, I was just saying if you want to give your email address to anybody, you can put that in the chat, or we can share it later to the attendees.
I will.
And in case they want to reach out and talk to you about the disaster management system or the cyclone preparedness program, or if they want any more information, please feel free to reach out and make contact that way. And then the last question we'll have, and then I think we're running just about out of time. We got just a couple of minutes left. Is how does your shelter system accommodate people and livestock, so animals in disaster?
A very good question. Nowadays, the cyclone shelters are designed such a way that the cattle can home on the ground floor. People do not like to come to the shelter without the cattle most of the cases. So their accommodation system in the ground floor. They can keep their cattle on the ground floor. Then they go on the upstairs in the first floor, and in some cases there are two-storied. When there is multi-purpose cyclone shelters are there, most of them are school by daytime, and when there are emergency, it's turned into cyclone shelter. And in the past, still not only past, but still we are struggling to maintain with this shelter in many cases. Now there is another component added. There is a shop on the ground floor, which is voluntarily given to one of the neighbors, so that his responsibility, that it is free of cost, but his responsibility will be to manage it in a sense that need to clean it, periodical maintenance in terms of cleaning, checking whether the doors are okay. Yeah, those things. So they're trying to manage it this way, because many of the cyclone shelters are sometimes located a little bit away from the communities, sometimes, some cases. But gradually those things are improving, because earlier it was based on political decision where a cyclone shelter will be located. Most of the cases it is difficult to get the land for the constructing it. Nowadays government has decided to, of course, let me quickly also tell that what is the funding coming for the cyclone shelter. So this is coming from different donor agencies by the government departments, and interestingly, personal level donations are coming for constructing thousands of cyclone shelter. There is one or two donor from the Middle East, unnamed donor. They never disclose their name, but they allocated, I think, about I forgot the amount, but about constructing 500 cyclone shelter from that very person, one person, unnamed. We never disclose his name. So and these are coming as a package to buy the land and then converting into cyclone shelter itself. Now, it is improving nowadays. Now GIS technology being used to identify the most suitable location, how the people can access is better. Also there is provision for labor room for pregnant women, and also there is separate toilet for women nowadays, so that they do not face any adverse situation because this is all these are coming from the learnings from the past experiences.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you very much for joining us today and presenting the Bangladesh sort of overview of the disaster management module and how you're preparing for cyclones and everything else like that. Thank you very much. It's been very informative, and you did put your email address into the chat there. I saw that. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out. And of course, if you have any questions as well about Teams or the webinar series or anything else like that, please certainly let us know. We'd be happy to answer those as well. And again, just keep in mind that the Teams annual conference coming up, and as well as that critical infrastructure conference coming up in Bucharest in June. Lots of other events coming up this year. If you have any recommendations or any suggestions on different nations or national models you would like to see in the webinar series, please let us know, and we'll certainly reach out to some people and try and get them onto the webinar series and present their national models. So thank you very much, everybody, and thanks for joining us. And we will be we'll see you next time for the World Bank presentation. Thanks a lot, everybody.